plans to remarketise probation and basically sell it all off again. The government U-turned that day because of that campaign and the pressure we applied, and it represented a significant victory against Chris Grayling's flagship privatisation policy. The decision to transfer 80% of probation's work into the state-run National Probation Service from the failing 20 community rehabilitation companies was obviously welcome, but no, it's not the end of the campaign. The proposal to contract out the remaining 20% of work in the form of interventions and programmes is reckless and represents a clear and present danger to community safety. So the message from this Congress must remain. We won't be satisfied until we see the return of all of probation's work under state ownership and control. There hasn't been the luxury to celebrate the victory, for the probation unions are now engaged in detailed negotiations on the arrangements and terms of the staff transfer for offender management work, firstly in Wales, scheduled for December, and the rest of that work by April 2021, by which time these useless privateers will be consigned to the rubbish bin of history. But there are serious questions that remain unanswered, and it was great to hear from Laura Pidcock yesterday about the pledge to hold a public inquiry into exclusion lists on trade unionists, but we're demanding that the same should apply to the disastrous Transforming Rehabilitation programme that has sent hundreds of millions of pounds into black holes still unaccounted for. Because we have our own long list of shame when it comes to this programme for people who need to be made accountable. Well, no prizes for guessing who tops that list. Chris, I've got no ferries, I've not got a clue. Grayling is right up there. Former Chief of the Probation Service, Michael Spurr, who wrote a quite laughable letter. We can't release it, it's still under legal privilege, but I will do, and it's actually sick, not laughable, who said, TR will be all right on the night. It's no more unsafe than the current system. 5 years on, we've seen a 43% spike in serious further offences across England and Wales, usually involving grievous crime against the person, often involving rape, and increasingly murder. Safe? You're having a laugh, Michael. You should come to Parliament and tell them what you said, and you should be made accountable. He wasn't the only liar. There was plenty more. Ministers like Liz Truss, who we on record said that one of your contractors working links are unsafe. They have a supervision model that is costing lives. We weren't listened to. Safe? Try telling that to the brave campaigning families like the Marshalls in Wales, whose son Connor was brutally murdered by a perpetrator who, because of the operational model that Working Links had implemented, could only be contacted maybe by phone, if he happened to have his mobile on, so people could track his whereabouts. There's an inquest at large on that, so obviously I can't say too much, but they don't think it's safe. And credit to that family, President, they do not want retribution against staff. They want Working Links called to account for their sins. The directors of Working Links, who scuttled away just before that miserable company went into administration, need to be brought to account, need to answer questions, and need to explain to families like the Marshalls what went wrong. So there's a long list, and we need that public inquiry as and when we have a Labour government to establish it. We need to know where the money has gone. We need to know who profited from transforming rehabilitation and who should pay compensation to the families of victims such as I've described. Congress, will mark this victory for now, but we want total victory. And total victory is within our grasp if we maintain that campaign. And I want this Congress to send a loud message to the incoming Labour government, we won't rest until we achieve total reunification. I move.
Thank you, Ian, and well done to everybody at NAPO for the campaign. Can I call on Unison to second?
President, Congress, Debbie Potter, Unison, proud to second this motion from our sister trade union in probation, NAPO. Because together we fought the disastrous grading reforms to the probation service. The vital work the probation service does often goes unnoticed, because when it's done well, it can be invisible. But when probation work is weakened or broken up, it becomes everyone's problem. We tried to warn Chris Grading at the time that it would end in disaster. Of course, he didn't listen. We argued that a split between the MPS and the CRCs would damage the whole service. We said that introducing payment by results would damage it too. We warned that privatisation would lead to hidden costs and suck public money into private profit. We feared that the real price would be paid by probation staff, service users and local communities. Congress, it gives me no pleasure to say we were proved right. As a result of Grading's reforms, victims of crime were forgotten, staff found themselves working to artificial targets where expertise came last and profit came first. An award-winning service broken apart and left in critical condition. Searching criticisms were made by the National Audit Office, the Public Accounts Committee, and Her Majesty's Inspectorate. MPs decided they were, and I quote, unconvinced that transforming rehabilitation could ever deliver an effective or viable probation service. Even this Tory government were forced to listen and reverse course. But Congress, our campaign is not over. We need all parts of the probation service brought into public service, including unpaid work and intervention. And we need to make probation a locally run, locally accountable service again. Congress, probation at its best was always a local service, working to local priorities with local partners. This was pulled apart by government centralisation. This has stifled local responsiveness and damaged partnership working. So Congress, please support this motion so that dedicated probation staff and their unions can rebuild our probation service. I second.
Thank you, Debbie, and to all at Unison as well, and to all our probation workers. So can I now call the vote on motion 15? All those in favour, please show. Thank you. Any against? That's carried unanimously. Congress, it's now great pleasure for me to introduce Kier Starmer, QC, MP for Holborn and St Pancras, and Shadow Secretary of State for exiting the European Union. Over the past few years, Keir has played a leading role in stopping a damaging Tory Brexit that would devastate working people and communities. He's repeatedly and forensically held the Tory government to account, both inside Parliament and out, revealing their total lack of Brexit planning and exposing the impact that it would have on all of our members. Over the past few weeks, he and his Labour Party colleagues have led efforts to try to stop the government from crashing out the UK out of Europe with no deal. And I'm sure we're going to hear a bit more about that from him now in a minute. Keir, you're very welcome. I would invite you to address Congress and to Congress to give him a welcome.
Thank you very much, Congress, for inviting me to be with you this morning. Mark, thank you for your introduction. And Francis, thank you for the invite to be with you here today. And I'm very glad I came in early so that I could hear those motions about criminal justice, because I would like to record my thanks for the unions, the delegates and all their members for the work that they do in criminal justice against the odds with savage cuts and privatisation. So thank you for everything that you're doing. I was obviously particularly interested in the comments about why Boris Johnson might be interested in criminal justice should he decide to break the law in weeks to come. Now, normally, I'm a supporter of early release and rehabilitation, but I might have to think again about that if he finds himself in that position. Congress, what a time for us to be meeting here. Parliament closed down, a general election on the horizon, and at least 21 former Tory MPs with a newfound interest in employment law and looking through unfair dismissal provisions. I hope that they're in a trade union because the truth be told, we've had a hell of a week. Now, I know that over the last 3 years, you've often heard the phrase, it's a big week in politics, it's a crunch week. I was chuckling with someone this morning over Brexit, breakfast even, about it, that we laugh and say it's a big week coming up. But what a week we've just had in politics. 6 big votes, the first votes Boris Johnson's ever faced. He became Prime Minister back in July. We had the summer recess. He had to come back and face Parliament properly for the first time. 6 big votes, and he got defeated 6 times. How good does it feel, conference? Jeremy Corbyn 6, Boris Johnson 0. What a week. He thought he would corner us and ended up cornered. And he's actually making Theresa May look like a winner. This is quite something. But I want to thank the trade union movement for the support that you've given to Jeremy, to me, and to the Labour Party, not just in the last week, important though that was, but over the 3 years that we've been fighting on these issues. On issues such as citizens' rights, where we started that battle in July 2016, just a month after the referendum, the battle for citizens' rights, the battle for employment rights, and making sure that our rights do not lag behind those across Europe, a really important principle. The fight to make sure that there was a deal that we could put forward that would protect jobs in the economy, the fight to expose Theresa May's deal for what it was, and of course, most recently, the fight against no deal. Thank you for your support. Thank you for the way we've been able to work together. It has made us so much stronger in each of those battles. And we could have ducked them, but we didn't. And we stood up for working people together. And the way we've done that, the Labour Party, hand in hand with the trade union movement, with the TUC, that's the way we should work. It's the way we should work in opposition, and it's the way we will work in power. Conference, look what we're up against. Johnson as Prime Minister. That used to be a joke. Now it's reality. A man of no conviction, no real regard for the truth, who's installed a right-wing cabinet, have no mistake about that, and who is now openly talking about breaking the law. This is a Tory party that's given up on being a serious party of government, and it is setting about tearing up the values that bind us together, both as a trade union movement, a labour movement, but actually across the country. The values they're tearing up: tolerance, a Prime Minister who favours division over unity. His whole strategy is based on division. Dignity, equality, our values, internationalism and solidarity. These mean nothing to Johnson. He is taking us down a right-wing Trumpian road, and this is a serious moment for everybody in our movement and across the country, because everybody has to ask themselves at this moment, which side are you on in this battle? And that's why we worked so hard over the summer on a cross-party basis, and with Jeremy Corbyn bringing together the opposition leaders. This is not easy, but over the summer we brought everybody together onto one page, with one plan, with collective intent, purpose, and discipline. The intent and the purpose was to stop a no-deal Brexit and to pass a law to do that, and we succeeded in that last week. And so the position now is, if no deal is passed, and it looks unlikely, and if Boris Johnson can't get Parliament to vote for no deal, and that doesn't seem likely, he must seek an extension to Article 50. He does not have authority to crash us out of the EU on the 31st of October without a deal. And that is a huge collective coming together across Parliament to achieve that. And do not underestimate the role that Jeremy Corbyn played in bringing those forces together and instilling that collective way to go forward at this political moment. Our legal advice is clear. The Prime Minister must comply with the law. That shouldn't really be an issue. The fact we're even talking about it speaks volumes. So what I say to the Prime Minister is this: accept that Parliament has spoken, accept you don't have a mandate for a no-deal Brexit, and follow the law. It shouldn't have taken an act of Parliament to spell all that out. It shouldn't have required us to take control of proceedings and pass a law. It shouldn't have required a humble address, which was sort of buried years ago without anybody paying much attention to it, or ancient procedures. The fact that we've had to resort to those processes tells you everything you need to know about Boris Johnson. He thought that by announcing that he would shut down Parliament, he would stop us, he would prevent us from doing what we've done. Actually, it had the opposite effect. I can tell you over the summer there were lots of discussions about precisely when we should take the necessary steps, with some people saying week 1, which was me, others saying no, week 2, week 3. We had a discussion, a proper, full discussion, as you'd expect. The moment Boris Johnson then said he was shutting down Parliament, everybody agreed we'd do it last week in 4 days. It was incredible the way that he unified the opposition to himself and caused the very thing he didn't want. He now thinks, and you saw the scenes earlier this week, that by shutting down Parliament, he will silence us. Nothing could be further from the truth. Nothing could be further from the truth. Just as we worked during the summer to achieve what we did last week and early this week, we will work each and every day of this shutdown to enforce the law, to defeat Johnson, and to bring him down. Prime Minister, you can hide from Parliament all you like, but when you return, we will be ready for you. Because, Congress, don't mistake the seriousness of the situation that we're in. Your General Counsel statement was explicit. Quote, no deal would be a disaster for working people. It cuts right across the very rights and protections that mean so much to this movement. UK workers and trade unions would be unable to enforce their rights. Those rights that are enforced on a daily basis for you and your members and so many other people. Employment rights, environmental rights, consumer rights will begin to lag behind the standards across Europe. And there will be no level playing field. And we know where that leads. That leads to deregulation, division, and exploitation. That is exactly where that leads. Of course, there are wider consequences of a no-deal Brexit, well known in this room. The devastation to the manufacturing sector. The motor industry is only one example of that, but it's a good example of that. And I've spent a lot of time with Unite colleagues and GMB colleagues going around the plants, looking at the processes, taking great pride in the work that your members are doing in manufacturing. And I say great pride because my dad was a toolmaker and we lived through the doldrums of manufacturing. So for me to see the revival is really incredible. And then you have the threat of no-deal Brexit, which will take an axe to it. That is unforgivable for everybody who's done so much to revive manufacturing in this country. And we're all familiar with the statements from Nissan, Honda, Ford, and Vauxhall, and worrying they are, not just to those working in those particular firms, but of course all the other businesses that are supplying them, that are there as part of the chain of activity that is there for manufacturing. Look at the damage it would do to the NHS, and medicines and medicine supply. Are we really in the 21st century talking about an inability to get essential medicines into our country because of a no-deal Brexit. I went to Bristol just 2 weeks ago to talk to a company there and the staff that supply medical equipment from abroad into this country. And I said, what has the government told you to do in the event of a no-deal Brexit? Because the equipment they're using is time sensitive. And they said they would try to book us onto a ferry. That was the response to getting medicines into our country. Look at the squeeze that it will put on incomes and food prices. Johnson wants to pretend that won't happen. Gove has been forced into admitting it will. And then look at our ports and borders. And again, I've been to those ports and borders many, many times, in particular Dover, where many of our union members are working really hard on a very efficient system there, where lorries go through Dover in about 2 minutes. The Yellowhammer document showed that on a worst-case scenario, 2 minutes could become 2 days. 2 days at Dover. Now, the implications are there in the Yellowhammer documents. The government knows all this. Andrea Leadsom, apparently this morning, has been saying, we know it, but it may be best if the public don't know. They don't need to be troubled by knowing the details of what's happened. They know, and they are spending millions of pounds telling the country to get ready for a no-deal Brexit, but they won't tell us what to get ready for because they won't disclose the documents. Well, we'll see about that. We'll see about that. I think the only conclusion we can draw from the government's behaviour is that they think this is a price worth paying, and they think that the damage to working people is collateral damage that they're perfectly happy to sustain. Don't be fooled by Johnson saying we're making progress in the negotiations. They've had 7 weeks to make progress in the negotiations, and they haven't even put any proposals forward. They haven't even put any proposals on the table. The Irish government tell us that. The EU countries tell us that. Even Amber Rudd has admitted that they're not doing any work on really getting a deal. Boris Johnson was challenged to come up with a proposal within 30 days. He said it's blistering, but he'd do it. Well, I remind him, it's now day 21 of the 30 days, and he hasn't put a proposal on the table. And the excuses tell their own story. There's some real corkers. In the last week, we've had from the government, the reason we haven't put any proposals is because during the summer, we thought you might do something in Parliament in September, so we thought it best not to put any proposals up. Come on. And then the one last week, we haven't put any proposals forward because we were scared they might leak. Seriously? So we're not putting any proposals forward in case they leak, and therefore there won't be any proposals put forward. This is the dog ate my homework excuse. The truth is, I don't think Johnson has the first idea how to negotiate a deal that would actually protect jobs and rights. Worse than that, I don't think he's got any interest in negotiating a deal that would protect jobs and rights. For the Tories, that is not what Brexit is about. And if you haven't seen it, just take a look at the letter that Johnson wrote to President Tusk in August. And he said in that letter, quote, UK laws and regulations will potentially diverge from the EU. Then the sentence, that's the point of our exit. That tells us everything. What he wants is to cut off the level playing field, particularly in workplace rights, to diverge, to separate, to have different standards here to Europe, to deregulate our economy. If there was ever any need for evidence of the plan to deregulate, it's in that letter. That, for Johnson, is the purpose of Brexit, to deregulate, to privatise public services. This is not for him a technical question of whether you're in or out of the EU. It's an ideological question of whether you deregulate and privatise your public services. Labour and the trade union movement, we have never accepted that, Congress, and we never will. And so we have to put a stop to this. We've beaten them in Parliament. We're going to have to beat them at the ballot box. That battle is coming. It cannot and it should not be put off. We need a Labour government. We need a radical Labour government. We need a government capable of pulling us back from the no-deal brink and transforming our society and public services. So it will be a crucial election. On the one hand, no deal and all those consequences. On the other hand, to rebuild our country, our economy, our society, and our communities. Now, I know Brexit will be a central issue in that election, and I know we need to draw a line under the wasted Tory years and clear up the Tory mess. People are yearning to move on, and we've got to find a way to do so. Congress, a referendum is the only way forward. Jeremy was right. Jeremy was right to say at this Congress yesterday that an incoming Labour government will commit to a referendum. We have to break the impasse. We have to find a way forward. A referendum is the only way. And of course, Remain should and will be on the ballot paper, along with a credible option to leave. We need to ask people a basic question after 3 years of failure by this government. Do you want to leave on the terms on offer, or would you rather remain? And then we need to move on to the wider issues that got us into politics, the wider issues that actually are behind the reason you're here today. We spend too little on those issues, the big issues that really concern people up and down the country, the injustices. I can't list them all, but broken housing markets across the country. We've got to do something about that injustice. 4 million children in poverty, a collapsing health and care system, insecure work, the erosion of trade union rights, deepening inequality, whether that's income, wealth, health, or opportunity. And the fact that life expectancy is going down in this country in the 21st century in some areas is shocking. And of course, the climate emergency. Those are the issues that have had almost no attention in the last 3 years, as all the time and energy has been sucked up by Brexit. We have got to settle the Brexit issue. We can only do that with a referendum, but we have got to move on to these wider issues that, in my view, were right there behind the very decision that was made in 2016, injustices left for years lingering, which an incoming government has absolutely got to get to terms with. And I'm really glad that they've been centre stage in this Congress. And I think what Jeremy said in his speech yesterday about a radical change to workplace rights was so needed, and you could feel the energy from afar. I watched the speech. You could feel the response of Congress, the response across the country, this yearning for a bigger change about the things that really matter beyond Brexit. So we've got to rise to that challenge. The Tories aren't going to rise to that challenge. They caused the problems in the first place. So when an election comes, with the trade union movement behind us, we can and we must defeat Johnson, defeat his politics, and install a truly radical Labour government. Thank you very much, Congress. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Congress. Stay for 1 minute.
Congress, I'm sure you'll, we want you to stay there, Keir, because you're a lawyer and you can think on your feet. We just wanted you to know that as you were speaking there, the BBC News is reporting that Scotland's highest court has ruled the parliamentary suspension unlawful.
Wow.
And
better get back to London.
So we know you haven't got your wig and gown, but we thought we might want to give you the opportunity in case you had any instant reaction.
Yeah, well, look, let me, I'm sorry, will you indulge me just for 2 or 3 minutes? Because it was obvious, I think, to everybody that not only was shutting down Parliament at this crucial time the obviously wrong thing to do, we should be sitting each and every day to resolve this crisis, but that the Prime Minister was not telling the truth about why he was doing it. And this is really important. The idea of shutting down Parliament, I think, offended people across the country, and then they felt that they weren't being told the truth. And that sums up the man. I'm really pleased with this result. I'm surprised because for a court to make a declaration like that on an issue like this is a huge thing for us. It vindicates everything we've done last week. And I think what I can do and what others need to do is to get back to Parliament, see if we can't open those doors and get back in and get Boris Johnson back in Parliament so we can hold him properly to account. Thank you, Congress. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Gosh.
I think he is left now. I was only joking. There's been no such announcement. It is on.